Hello and welcome to the ETTelecom's new webinar series. I'm Danish Khan from ETTelecom, and today we have Mr. Neil Chia, who is Research Director and Partner at Counterpoint Research. So Neil is going to give a presentation on design and manufacturing ecosystem, how India can build the ecosystem and make India the global leader in mobile technology. So uh, Neil is going to give a presentation, and after the presentation, we are taking the questions from the audience. So, Neil, over to you.
Yep. Thank you, Danish. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar series from ET. And what we would like to discuss today is how India is becoming a global hub for manufacturing mobile technologies, right? From mobile phones to smartphones, right? And in future, even more different products. So, before starting, I'll just give a quick introduction of Counterpoint Research if many of you are not aware. So we are a global industry research firm with almost 7 years in operations right now. And we have a global team of analysts across geographies, and most of them come from industry with a lot of experience in technology industry and also on the research side of things. So we cover a lot of different areas in technologies, right from mobile devices, Internet of Things, consumer pulse, as well as emerging technologies like 5G, AI, connected cars. So talking about India, so India has become a significant market in terms of mobile technologies. If you look at it, offers tremendous scales for everyone in the mobile value chain. This is partly because obviously we are the most populated country after China, and we might even surpass China in few years. But the point is, this gives everyone in the value chain a lot of scale, because China is more of a closed market. The next biggest market is India. So if you look at, we have close to 1.2 billion mobile connections, and and 800 million users, mobile phone unique users, and close to 400 million smartphone users right now. And end of this year, we might even reach 480 million smartphone users, and close to we have 400 million feature phone users. So if you look at, India is the second largest market in terms of number of mobile phone users as well as smartphone users. In next 5 years, we are going to see almost more than a billion smartphones being sold and close to half a billion feature phones. So this offers tremendous scale to everyone. Looking at how the market has evolved, right? So India has predominantly been a feature phone market. The per capita income has been low, and obviously we have been one of the few countries which have adopted 4G a little bit later than the developed markets across the world. So we have seen a tremendous transition from 3G to 4G, and then now and at the same time from feature phone to smartphone. We are almost close to 60% of the mobile phones sold are smartphones right now. Though this has slowed down a little bit in last few years, as still we have bottom of pyramid more than 400 million users, as you see, which are still using 2G feature phones, and entry of Geo phone with a 4G smart feature phone. It also slowed down a little bit adoption of smartphone in over the last couple of years. But however, that is changing fast now. Most of the users which have warmed up with 4G connection on feature phones and are also looking at what all can be done using a smartphone. We will see a tremendous growth in smartphone in next coming years. So at the same time, what has driven most of this growth, right? There has been different cusp of growth we have seen. Starting with first, when players like Motorola, Xiaomi entered India market, they went with a very unique go-to-market strategy, just selling online rather than going for a traditional multi-level distribution of mobile phones. And they partnered with likes of Flipkart, and tremendously saw a huge growth in market share because Flipkart was direct to consumer, and there were a lot of attractive offers and pricing offered because of Xiaomi's and Motorola's uh, Xiaomi's and Motorola's low cost products and global scale they have. And since then, we have seen the tremendous shift in market share between the Chinese OEMs, Indian OEMs, and the overall global international OEMs. So global international OEMs like Samsung, Apple, Nokia, they commanded like 53% share in 2015 Q1, now dropped to 31%. And if you look at the Indian brands, which had 35% share, has relegated to almost 2% market share. This has there has been a strong journey of growth for Chinese brands, and if you look at the most of the growth came between 2016 and 2017, which exactly coincides with the entry of Jio in India and the transition from 3G to 4G. So basically, Chinese, due to their uh, access to the 4G portfolio they had in China 1.5 years ago, could scale faster in this 3G to 4G transition compared to the Indian brands. And as a result, the total combined Chinese brands share is 67%. And they're not only leading in India, but globally as well. The key reasons, if you see why they have been able to grow so fast in markets like India, it comes down to obviously they had tactical advantages in terms of deeper pockets to support promotions, and even unique go-to-market strategies by going online or offline direct distribution. But the key foundation was access to Chinese supply chain ecosystem, strong component relationship, and grow great economies of scale. This has been possible because China itself offered a strong ecosystem of component supply chain and manufacturing that has helped them give global scale, reduce the prices of the devices, the cost of the devices, and drive market share really quickly, offer really good value proposition to consumers. So if this is the secret sauce for growth of Chinese in India brand, and this is what I think is very important for any country which wants to lead like what China has done or Chinese OEMs have done. So we have to develop in India these uh, three influencing factors for dominating the manufacturing ecosystem or the global mobile technologies ecosystem. So how have we progressed so far in terms of building a homegrown manufacturing ecosystem? So there are different factors which are influencing how the homegrown manufacturing ecosystem is shaping. Obviously, the latest one we are seeing, the first trend is the US-China trade war. The US-China trade war is a blessing in disguise for markets like India, Vietnam, Indonesia, which are emerging as manufacturing hubs. So the US putting tariffs on Chinese exported goods, which are imported into US, that has led to many OEMs and even manufacturers within China to diversify their manufacturing base beyond China. And that has helped markets like India and Vietnam, which have been lucrative locations to drive up the manufacturing ecosystem. So in 2019, we are seeing at almost a 4% drop in the total manufacturing done in China for mobile phones. So India and Vietnam has been the key beneficiaries. Almost China is going to lose almost 200 million handsets assembling to India and Vietnam this year, and this is going to uh, increase more and more as India and Vietnam themselves have a very good policies. If they can churn out very good policies to attract the ecosystem players to those markets. So what has India done in terms of policies? Talking about policies, so far since the Make in India program has progressed in the last 4 to 5 years, we have seen tremendous transformation from India becoming a more manufacturing hub compared to 2013-14 when it used to import bulk of its phones. At least we have gone from importing to semi knockdown units to CKD, which is completely knockdown manufacturing. So complete knockdown is basically where we are even assembling PCBAs, which is PCB assembly, and all the components mounted using surface mount technology machines, SMT machines, and a lot of different ODMs or original design manufacturers, OEM, original equipment manufacturers, and EMS, electronic manufacturing services solutions companies like Foxconn. They have set up SMT lines to uh, save this duties 10 to 15% or 20% duties and pass it on to consumers and make it cheaper to manufacture in India. Obviously, India also has advantage versus China in terms of labor cost. The only disadvantage what we see is still the policies needs to be stronger to attract more ecosystem players. So in terms of progress, talking about progress, we have seen manufacturing units set up across India. And key if you look at this chart, the key states which have increased capacities in terms of manufacturing and attracted talent for manufacturing ecosystem and suppliers has been Noida hub. It's the Noida cluster, and in AP and Tamil Nadu from Foxconn and Flextronics. So right now we are up to 350 plus million production mobile phone production capacity per year. On an average, if you look at Noida, which is hub to bigger manufacturers like Oppo, Vivo, Samsung, they are manufacturing, and even Hypad, they are manufacturing millions, tens of millions of units per month. And in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, as I said, Flextronics and Foxconn, they're churning out multiple devices for brands like Xiaomi, almost of 4 to 5 million units, 5 to 6 million units combined per month. So in terms of mobile phone production, we are going to cross 400 million units by 2021 produced domestically, out of which the staggering stat and the most positive outcome is almost 25% of those phones will be exported from India. So India is not only satisfying its domestic consumption, but also is slowly becoming an export hub. So players like Samsung, they are exporting millions of phones per month now to other markets. And Samsung also set up a bigger factory. And we are going to see also similar trends as US and China trade war intensifies. We'll see more manufacturers setting up manufacturing hubs over here and exporting, making India an export hub. So what does this mean? So we have good manufacturing assembling setup over here, which is progressing. Obviously, it's not we have not reached the 100% goal over here, but in terms of the value addition to the overall economy, so that is a key metric to look at. So total $19 billion components will be used in 2019 into mobile phones, out of which $2.2 billion worth components will be sourced locally, which is a significant growth, almost 12% pure contribution to the overall components. I'm not talking about software and other R&D stuff which is being done here, but it's mostly components and related component design, whatever is being sourced locally. And it is important to look at what is the overall contribution of different components, because that will define how we attract different component suppliers and create a very robust ecosystem of manufacturing. So if you look at a phone, right, on an average, a PCBA, which is a printed circuit board assembly, right, it contributes to almost 55% or 54 to 55% of a cost of a device. And the PCBA basically houses a lot of different components, right, from different chipsets to semiconductor components like MLCC, capacitors, passive components, and also RF components. So these components obviously are all semiconductor components. We don't have a foundry yet, but what we can do is at least source PCBs locally, mount all these different components using the SMT machines, which will add some value to the overall economy. It will add jobs, it will add productivity, it will also help different OEMs to control the quality of the devices within their factories instead of importing from China directly the PCBAs which are readily mounted. So PCBA is important. So displays, FPCs, and overall design is still being done outside. There is still room for us to do display module packaging over here. Some of the packaging what we have started doing is cameras within the phones. So front camera, rear cameras, even batteries. Housing is something which we need to also develop in India. So earlier we had a lot of plastic components, so that was still easy to source. But as we move to glass, aluminum, and metal components in terms of housing, we need advanced CNC machining uh, and uh, and packaging for the overall phones housing. So that needs to be developed within India as well. So it is very important to target different components which are where there is a high possibility of making the local value addition to almost 100%. So some of the PCBAs components within the PCBAs, what we can do locally could be PCBA design, SMT machines, which we are already doing, some antenna procurement, PCBs, and others. So what are the different, which are the different players which contributes to these key components, right? How many of them are already in India? How many of them are completely in India? How many of them are partially in India, right? So it is very important to look at, and how can we attract those different ecosystem players, supply chain players to India to increase their design, manufacturing, QA support, and R&D within India. So already IDH, which is Independent Design House, which designs phones for different manufacturers, where many manufacturers outsource them to different IDHs. So the world's largest IDH is Wingtech, as well as we have Wingtech. Then there is Indian company, Indian/slash Chinese company called Books. FIH, Foxconn's design unit is also over here. That is also one of the big. HiPad is one of the ODMs as well. And then there is another biggest player, which is Hochin, which is still not here in India. So all these grayed out logos means they are not present in India in any format. So Oppo, Vivo are manufacturing for themselves. So they are more of OEM or ODM for themselves. But they also outsource a few phones to other players like Wingtech and Hochin, especially the low end ones. So these are the players which are come up first, and once they come up, they will start to attract their component supplier partners to set up shops around their manufacturing facilities. So with higher duties on some components like mobile chargers, accessories, even battery, we are seeing a lot of different companies, big names in this mobile charging battery, setting up shop in India. Not many of them are actually completely manufacturing the fuel cell, which is most of the cost, or most of the percentage of the total cost for a battery. But we are seeing a lot of assembling over here. Some value addition is being added, procuring local components to form a battery. Display, as I said, is and PCBA are the major contributors for towards the BOM cost, bill of material cost of a device. So we still have to see lot of investment from these brands and how we can attract these brands to come and set up shop in India, or at least R&D to start with, or packaging to start with. Similarly, for camera, we are seeing a few brands which are already trying to set up facilities in India closer to their key customers such as Samsung, Oppo, Vivo, and as a result, we'll see a lot of activity in camera, battery in coming years. The display and PCBA remains critical. We have seen in PCBAs there is indirect contribution coming from likes of Qualcomm, Samsung, memory players like SK Hynix, Toshiba, Western Digital, which have some of the R&D and software offices in India. So if they're not manufacturing the chipsets over here, but at least there is some increased amount of contribution in terms of R&D, software development, in which India is way ahead because of the engineering talent we have. So it's very important to attract these different players to build up the different ecosystem. But attracting these players, there are different ways we can do that. and it's very important for us to do that in a very phased and realistic manner, where we can increase the value addition in phases. And government actually tried that with phase manufacturing program, but it has been a stop start thing, and it has not been consistent. So we need consistent policies from government, but at least what the low hanging fruits in terms of the components which we can do it locally, these are the different components, and we already done some amount of push for attracting all these players, as we saw in the previous chart. The value addition, because of these 100%, if we can do 100% locally, can go maximum up to 17%. So right now we are at 12%, as you saw. So still we can maximize completely in this phase one of different components which you can source locally. Secondly, display cameras, flex is another set of components which you can try to attract different players into the ecosystem. OEMs will play a bigger role, and so would government, and setting up facilities for infrastructure for these different players to attract. This will, if we can successfully have a display packaging and then have a display foundry, it would boost our value addition to almost 28%. And finally, but this will take almost 0 to 6 years, or depending on the policies of the government, ideally. And the final would be 0 to 12 years, which is the phase three, and where we require a foundry where we can build a semiconductor components locally. That right now there are just few foundries in the world. TSMC in Taiwan leads the pack. Then we have Samsung in Korea, Samsung LSI. Then we have Global Foundries in US, and SMIC in and UMC in China. So we don't have any foundries yet, but I think if we can build a homegrown foundry, or at least convince some of the foundry players to have a foundry in India, I think we can dramatically increase the value addition in churning out different semiconductor components which form bulk of the bill of materials of the devices. So talking about government policies, right? So there can be different policies. We have seen one good step which is taken by government is corporate tax reduction for new firms, to attract new firms, like we have talked about, to almost 17%. I think that will attract a lot of players compared to likes of moving to Vietnam or Indonesia, because it slightly undercuts what Vietnam or other are offering, right? So that is a very good move by government to boost Make in India, and for existing players as well, some reprieve from 30% to 22%. Obviously, incentives and subsidies is the key in driving up the manufacturing ecosystem. China has done really good job. Even Vietnam has done really good job in offering subsidies, incentives to different manufacturers in terms of either land or electricity or taxes, and so forth. Government has had a few incentive schemes, and it was very different across states, and that's why we have seen in some states we are seeing a lot of concentration of manufacturing. In some states there is hardly any manufacturing. So I think that should be a national policy, a standard policy, which could drive, and then we can have a state level policy. But the broader policy should be at federal level, and then we can have at state level different incentive schemes and subsidies. So there is some sort of competition between states, but at the same time there is a blanket incentive or scheme at federal level as well. Obviously, local sourcing relaxation is another I would say a good scheme for pushing different manufacturers to do locally sourcing, and also if you look at different export policies, would drive a much more attractive proposition to different manufacturers, because if you give export policies, if you give export incentives to different manufacturers, that will help, that will make them think, okay, we can not only uh, support manufacturing in India for domestic consumption, but also we can make India an export hub. Samsung is already doing that, And if we have more export oriented policies, I think that will actually catalyze the manufacturing ecosystem in India. So this is more from government and policies and what they should do in terms of different import duties for different components, which could catalyze, right? But apart from that, we need a very strong foundation of R&D and IP driven innovation led economy. That is missing in India. We are more of a service or just labor intensive country right now, which is cheap to do manufacturing or R&D work, but we are mostly doing QA work, not pure R&D per se. There is R&D happening, but it is most of it is controlled by other companies which are outside of India. There is no local strong foundation right from education institution. We need a more innovation based culture. So government needs to take different steps in uh, public and private partnerships to have well funded education institutions where we can do carry out our own research, so there is less brain drain. At the same time, the innovation thinking based curriculum should be inculcated right from the primary schools. At the same time, once we have innovative culture based students out in the market looking for jobs, they should be also undergo next level of skilling and talent development for their particular fields where they are entering in. So human intellect and skill development is going to be very important. So different policies. So India has some policies for digital skilling, but it's still in a very nascent stages. And I think we need some bigger revolutionary steps here to have innovation culture right from uh, education to skilling to even intellectual property development within companies, and also like in US where most of these bigger companies fund different universities to do a lot of intellectual property development and research. We haven't seen much happening it in India, especially in technology space. We have seen a little bit in pharma space, but not in technology space. And once intellectual property is being developed, it needs to be rewarded. It needs to be incentivized, which will complete the innovation cycle, and will get into that innovation cycle, which will drive a lot of intellectual property. There are hardly any intellectual property being developed in terms of cutting edge cellular technologies, for example, like 3G, 4G, 5G. We haven't have any companies which are contributed, local companies contributing to that, or even universities, compared to what China or US or Korea or Japan have contributed to. So this is a very strong foundation we need to build in order to have the resource pool which is self-sufficient and very cognizant and knowledgeable. So those were the three top, I would say, drivers. But the fourth driver which is coming is which is IoT. So until now, from 2010 to 2000, I would say 20 right now, it was more about personal transformation. So 2G, 3G, 4G, it was all about mobile phones, right? But if you see now, the next decade is going to be all about how we're going to connect things beyond mobile phones or beyond our personal use cases. So we are going to enter an era of society and business transformation that will be led by new technology, cellular technology like NB-IoT, likes of Geo, Vodafone are looking to roll out NB-IoT network next year, which is going to drive a lot of low power IoT use cases, and 5G will bring high power, high content rich and low latency use cases, which will drive a lot of connected products. Once we have a lot of connected products, there is a lot of incentive for different manufacturers to scale beyond mobile phones. So into newer categories, device categories like smart cameras, smart homes, AR, VR, servers, connected mobility, e-bikes, mobile broadband devices. So the overall opportunity is limitless. How one ODM like Foxconn or EMS like Foxconn or even Wingtech can come and expand into multiple product lines manufacturing from India, for India, and for outside India. So, concluding this presentation with what are the overall benefits we would get while having a domestic supply chain ecosystem, right? So, obviously, intellectual property, in-house design, features, localization that are going to be key. But imagine logistics saving, where you have all the required talent, knowledge transferred talent over here locally, so you don't have to continuously travel or have to ask someone to travel from China or US or Europe or Japan or Korea to help out with R&D uh, or any other bottlenecks manufacturer would face, right? And obviously lower labor cost, higher skills development will boost the entire economy and put India to the global stage in terms of a manufacturing hub like how China is right now. So that is great for overall industry, but for consumers also it means lower prices because everything is manufactured locally. There is no import duty or logistics cost. The quality could be better controlled and it will be highly localized and quite innovative for consumers. And what we have seen, how different products which are manufactured in Korea or Japan and China are quite localized and drives a lot of innovation within the from the consumer's end as well, as they consume more content, create more content, communicate more locally as well as externally. So I would say for in my concluding remarks that India has done quite well in terms of building a manufacturing assembly hub, but the next stage is to attract all these different suppliers and ecosystem players to build a robust ecosystem, and that will drive the value addition considerably, as well as local talent and the knowledge base to manufacture and develop intellectual property. Thanks. Danish, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for the insightful presentation. So we have some questions, Neil, that our viewers have asked. So one by one, I would like to provide those questions to you to answer. So
Yeah.
one gentleman has posted a question that what steps should India take to attract global players to set up design centers and supporting manufacturing ecosystem? You have through your slides you have talked about the steps which have been taken already. What are the new steps required for India to attract global players which can bring scales through their design centers and support manufacturing ecosystem?
Correct. That's a great question. So, in terms of design is quite important because if you look at different manufacturers who are designing phones, actually, are either their own vertically integrated players like Apple, Samsung, Oppo, Vivo, or they are outsourcing to other ODMs, like I said, Wingtech or Hotchin, which are the top two players, or someone like FIH in Foxconn, right? So those players have good design expertise to help different OEMs who are entering into market or want to scale their products. So those players are entering now in India because they see the opportunity for bigger opportunity for not only India but for export market, and obviously US-China trade war is helping India. But specifically for design, I would say we do have a good, robust software talent over here. So that is one motivation. It's cheaper than China. And third, I think as India economy grows, more people use smartphones. You'll need a lot of localization of content and everything, right? So that localization is going to drive local designs, and for local designs you need to set up shops over here and to understand the pulse of consumers. You can't design based in China or US, right? So I think it is a cyclic process where many ODM manufacturers will be thinking of expanding into markets like India. And from government side, I would say there should be incentives for these design players if they contribute to a highly localized design which could drive and boost digital India they could get more incentives. So the percentage design contribution in India versus outside can be one of the factors which could be incentivized. That would drive a lot of local design houses in India.
Okay. So another question is, a gentleman has asked this question, like what sort of steps should Indian government take to further develop innovation and IPR locally? We talk about manufacturing, but we are not very much talking about local intellectual properties. So does the Indian government need certain steps to further enhance the capabilities on the IPR part, where we can lead with our own patents and technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we can take a leaf out of China's playbook, right? So what China has done is relentless. They've started with reverse engineering. Obviously, they did not have the local IPs that much, but what they have done is they've understood how different companies, IP-led companies, function outside of China, and they've tried to emulate a lot of steps on how the IP-led innovation culture is being driven. So take an example of Huawei, right? So Huawei has become a global leader in terms of 5G technologies or a lot of innovations which it has brought to the table. What it has done is in every country it goes, it sponsors a lot of universities and local talent, right? So that is why I mentioned the public-private partnership is very important. So we need players like Infosys, Wipro, and even outside players like Google or Facebook or even Qualcomm contributing to Indian universities, and at the same time government also allocating a lot of funding for driving intellectual property development within universities to start with. And once we have strong base of universities like China has or Japan has or even US has, right? So that is going to be one a big wheel in to drive the innovation cycle. The other wheel would be obviously within the enterprises themselves. Most of the enterprises when they start businesses here are mostly service driven mentality or trader driven mentality, not more R&D driven. So very few companies which start with R&D driven mentality. I think those companies which start with R&D driven mentality, they should be incentivized, and government should uh, allocate more funds to those companies which are driving R&D led, innovation led manufacturing or design or production.
Okay, so the next question is from Mr. Rajan. He has asked, what are the opportunities in the service part of for network integrators or in the market? Like obviously there is a service part as well. So how
Yeah.
big the opportunity would be for them in the market?
I think as we move from 4G to 5G, the network integration is going to be more and more complex. It's going to, we would, as a number of spectrum that could be used, the wide variety of spectrum that could be used for 5G. I think the heterogeneous network capabilities will require a very intensive integration of right from services architecture as well as software architecture. So definitely there can be a lot of demand for that as we move to 5G. Currently, what we are seeing, we have just three operators right now. But as we move, some of these operators, three big operators, if you leave out BSNL, some of the big operators are rolling out IoT network. So that IoT network will require a lot of system integration because the use cases are not going to be easy. There are a lot of brownfield deployments out there. They're not greenfield. So it requires a lot of system integration. So with as we move to IoT era and 5G era, there are going to be tremendous opportunities across different verticals, connecting industries, smart cities to have a more robust network, low power network or a 5G network, a dense network, public hotspots, connecting stadiums, connecting railways, connecting highways. So the opportunities are tremendous with upcoming 5G and NB-IoT network, as I said. So that will be the key drivers for for network infrastructure and services
Okay.
providers.
Okay, the next question is on the component ecosystem. So we are already making chargers, cable, power banks in India. So going forward, which are the key components that India could be making in the next 12 to 15 months? Because now the talk is on camera modules and displays. So are we going to see these as the main components getting made out of the Indian market, or are there more components as well where players are keenly focusing on?
Right. Yeah. So camera modules, obviously, we'll see a lot happening over here. And then I think within different components, as I said, there we can reach 100% local sourcing. Still, we are not 100% local sourcing in many of the components still. So within the phase one, which I said, there are a lot of components which we can source locally. Right now, we are just sourcing plastic components or metal components. But once we have some manufacturing like battery cell, for example, that will increase the value addition. And then other components, when you talk about front camera modules, is one obviously which is picking up, but it's still low percentage of the total camera modules which are shipped in India. Display would be the next, but I would say display foundry is a little bit a stretch. It requires a lot of investment, and we haven't seen keenness from different players to do that. But maybe cover glass could be next, like Corning, Gorilla Glass, and Asahi. They could start contributing and maybe open a small fab to start with, and because the opportunity for them is tremendous, not only in just mobile phones, but in TVs. Smart TV market is also growing. Also in automotive, where we will have, as we have more connected cars, we'll have more screens within the cars, as well as uh, uh, for the overall windshields as well, right? So glass display packaging is the next, I would say. At the same time, I would say the packaging for memory chip can also be done here. While we are not still geared to manufacture the wafer over here, but at least we can do some level of packaging which is being done in like Malaysia or Thailand. We can bring it over here, and we can do a lot of memory and chipset level packaging in India, which will also drive lot of local value addition.
Okay. The next question is on the IoT ecosystem. Has any player started IoT device manufacturing in India? And if yes, then at what scale? And how different the IoT device ecosystem manufacturing would be from the handset manufacturing in India?
That's a great question. So IoT manufacturing, we are seeing in a lot of different use cases. So IoT is all about different applications where you can either save money or make money. So what we have seen, the current big growth in IoT is happening in telematics and transportation, where we are seeing players like iTriangle, for example, manufacturing a lot of asset trackers, which are fitted within at the company level or aftermarket, and which helps in tracking different goods and helping them with different routes, as well as localization. We are seeing players like Map My India partnering with iTriangle, also offering those type of OBD2 devices, which is also great for insurance. So telematics is a low-hanging fruit, and that is where we are seeing a lot of development. And the development is where they are also doing at SKD level, uh, manufacture integrating modules within the devices and the PCBs and the software part on it, and also the dashboarding to manage those different devices and track those devices and see the different routes and track those, right? So that is happening. Next, we could see the biggest in livestock monitoring, agriculture, and smart cities. So surveillance cameras would be the next, I would say, as we are seeing a lot of surveillance cameras where we are digitizing the surveillance and traffic management systems within tier 1 cities and even tier 2 cities. So that those cameras will also need to be connected. So those manufacturing would also happen over here. Smart home cameras as well, and set-top boxes is another area, which is, and smart TVs. and smart speakers we would see are also going to have a different type of development in next 1 or 2 years within IoT space.
Okay. So Neil, we are taking the last question for today's webinar. So the question is, can local small medium enterprises become a part of this mobile manufacturing ecosystem, playing a role in either component manufacturing or service industry? Is there a possibility for SME segment as well?
I think so. So both on software side as well as hardware side. Obviously, there are some components which are like passive components, which could be manufactured here if there is a knowledge transfer from foreign company to a local company, or there are some executives which are working in a foreign company and then come and set up their own small and medium enterprise on manufacturing passive components, active components. I think that can also help a lot. Obviously, we are seeing app ecosystem, software side of things also happening. There are some players like Infosys, Wipro, Sasken Technologies. These are also contributing towards mobile manufacturing in terms of some level of software, which is being used at either factory level or for designing, right? Or for even for optimization and QA processes. So there are a lot of SMEs which can benefit, and they can pick which are the hot areas and where the value created or captured could be slightly higher, and go and pitch to different ODMs and OEMs and manufacturers, which have already set up shop in India.
Well, on that note, Neil, let's conclude this session. And thanks very much for this insightful presentation and taking all the questions. For the viewers, the recorded video will be available soon on ETTelecom after some minor editing, and they can watch the entire video on the website. And next week, we will come up with another interesting topic on channel strategies by handset companies in the Indian market to capture next billion smartphone users. And to present that, we will have Neil's colleague Tarun Pathak to share his views on the channel strategies, knowing that what is happening in the market, how sales are taking place. So thanks, Neil. Thanks very much once again. And we look forward to many more such insightful sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.